She thought she'd been stood up, that another attempt at love had crumbled before it even began. But when two 6-year-olds marched through that coffee shop door with a mission in their eyes and secrets on their lips, everything changed. They weren't supposed to be there. Their father had no idea. And what they were about to reveal would turn a failed date into the beginning of something neither she nor he ever saw coming. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Kayla Emerson checked her phone for the 7th time in 3 minutes. 6:47. 17 minutes late. She sat alone at the corner table of the Maple Avenue coffee shop, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug of chamomile tea that had long since gone cold. The autumn warmth that usually made this place feel cozy now felt suffocating. Around her, couples leaned into whispered conversations, their laughter punctuating the soft jazz playing overhead. She was the only person sitting alone. Kayla told herself she'd give him 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes, and then she'd text Diane, her colleague who'd set this whole thing up, and tell her that blind dates just weren't her thing. That after 2 years of focusing solely on her veterinary practice, maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe she'd been right to keep her walls up. Just one coffee date, Diane had insisted, 3 days ago cornering Kayla in the clinic break room. His name is Matthew Caldwell, 34, architectural engineer, and Kayla, he's wonderful, trust me. But trust was hard, and sitting here, watching the door, feeling that familiar sting of disappointment creeping in, trust felt impossible. At 6:51 p.m., the bell above the door chimed. Kayla looked up, hope flickering despite herself. But it wasn't a man in his 30s. It wasn't Matthew Caldwell. It was 2 identical little girls. They couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with curly brown hair that bounced as they moved and bright green eyes that scanned the coffee shop with startling determination. They wore matching red jackets over what looked like school uniforms, their small hands clasped together as they surveyed the room. And then those eyes landed on Kayla. Before she could process what was happening, the girls marched straight toward her table with the confidence of tiny soldiers on a mission. The taller one, by maybe half an inch, stopped directly in front of Kayla, tilted her head, and asked with complete seriousness, "Are you Miss Kayla?" Kayla blinked. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "I'm Daisy," the girl announced, then gestured to her sister. "This is Hazel. Our daddy's sorry he's late." The world seemed to tilt slightly. These were Matthew's daughters. They had to be. But Diane hadn't mentioned children, hadn't mentioned twins, hadn't mentioned... "He had to stay at work," Hazel added softly, her voice gentler than her sister's, "because of an emergency." Daisy quickly covered her sister's mouth with her hand. "Hazel!" Kayla's confusion must have been written all over her, because Daisy sighed, an old, weary sigh that seemed far too mature for a 6-year-old, and pulled out the chair across from Kayla. She sat down, tugging her sister down beside her. "Okay," Daisy said, folding her hands on the table like she was about to conduct a business meeting. "We should tell the truth." "The truth?" Kayla echoed. "Daddy doesn't know we're here," Hazel whispered, guilt flickering across her small face. Kayla's eyes widened. "He doesn't... Wait, what?" "But he is sorry he's late," Daisy insisted. "We know because we heard him on the phone last night." Kayla leaned forward, drawn in despite herself. "Last night?" Hazel nodded, her curls bouncing. "We were supposed to be asleep, but we heard him in the hallway. Someone called about a big problem at the new library building, something about the foundation. He kept saying that he couldn't believe this was happening tonight. He said he had something really important at 6:30 at the Maple Avenue coffee shop." "And you two figured out that was... here?" Kayla asked, a smile tugging at her lips despite the absurdity of the situation. "We're very smart," Daisy said matter-of-factly. "We remembered the name because Daddy wrote it on the calendar in the kitchen. He circled it 3 times and drew a smiley face."
Something warm flickered in Kayla's chest. A smiley face?
He was so excited, Hazel continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. He ironed his shirt yesterday. Daddy never irons. Kayla couldn't help but laugh, soft and genuine. These two little girls, sitting across from her with their earnest faces and their conspiracy, had just turned her disappointing evening into something else, something unexpected. So when we heard him say he might be late because of work, we made a plan, Daisy explained. We asked Mrs. Ferguson, she's our babysitter, to bring us here. We told her it was really, really important. Kayla glanced through the window. Sure enough, there was an elderly woman sitting in a sedan parked at the curb, watching the girls with a mixture of bewilderment and patience. When she caught Kayla's eye, she waved. We begged her, Hazel admitted, her cheeks flushing. We might have cried a little. Strategic crying, Daisy corrected firmly. It was necessary. Kayla pressed her lips together to keep from laughing outright. These girls were something else entirely. So, would you like to sit with me for a bit? Maybe have some hot chocolate? Their faces lit up like Christmas morning. Daisy jumped out of her chair and ran to the window, gesturing wildly to Mrs. Ferguson, who sighed but nodded with a resigned smile. When the girls settled back into their seats, Kayla caught the barista's attention and ordered 2 hot chocolates with extra whipped cream. As they waited, she studied Daisy and Hazel more carefully. Beneath their confidence and determination, there was something else, a weight, a sadness that children their age shouldn't carry. So, Kayla said gently, tell me about your dad. Does he go on many dates? The question hung in the air for a moment. The twins exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them, and then Daisy shook her head slowly. Never, she said quietly. You're the first one since Mommy went to heaven. The coffee shop noise, the hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of other customers, the clinking of cups, all of it seemed to fade into the background. Kayla felt her heart clench, her breath catching slightly. When did that happen? She asked, her voice soft. 2 years ago, Hazel said, her small hands fidgeting with the edge of her jacket. Right after we started pre-K, she got really sick really fast. The doctor said it was something with her brain. An aneurysm. The word appeared in Kayla's mind, clinical and cold, but she didn't say it out loud. Instead, she reached across the table and gently squeezed Hazel's hand. I'm so sorry, Kayla whispered. Daddy took care of us all by himself, Daisy said, and there was fierce pride in her voice now. He learned how to braid hair from YouTube videos. YouTube videos? Kayla asked, charmed. He watched them every night for a week, Hazel said, a small smile breaking through her sadness. He messed up a lot at first. My braids were all lumpy. But he kept trying, Daisy added. Now he's really good. The hot chocolates arrived, topped with mountains of whipped cream that threatened to spill over the edges. The girls carefully lifted their mugs, trying to sip without getting cream on their noses. They failed spectacularly, and soon both had white mustaches that made them look like tiny, serious old men. Kayla laughed, and the sound felt good, genuine and light. He makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches, too, Hazel said, licking whipped cream from her upper lip. With 3 kinds of cheese. And he sings to us every night, Mommy's favorite songs. His voice isn't as pretty as hers was, but we don't tell him that. Kayla felt tears prick at her eyes. She imagined this man she'd never met, this Matthew Caldwell, staying up late watching braiding tutorials, determined to give his daughters some semblance of normalcy. Learning to navigate grief while still showing up for 2 little girls who needed him to be everything. Daddy was really nervous about tonight, Hazel confided conspiratorially. He tried on 4 different shirts,
for?" asked Kayla, charmed. "And he practiced what to say in the mirror. We weren't supposed to be watching, but we peeked through his bedroom door." "What did he practice saying?"
Daisy straightened up and deepened her voice in an attempt to sound like her father. "Hi, I'm Matthew. Nice to meet you." She shook her head dramatically. "Hello, Kayla. I'm Matt." Then again, "Kayla, hi, I'm Matthew Caldwell." "He finally just said a bad word," Hazel whispered, her eyes going wide, "and decided to just be himself." Kayla laughed, really laughed, and it felt like something inside her chest was loosening, opening up. "He really wanted to be here," Daisy said, her tone serious again. "Daddy doesn't break promises. That's why we knew the work thing must be really important." "He designs buildings to keep people safe," Hazel explained. "If something's wrong with the foundation, the whole building could fall down. He always says safety is his responsibility. Safety is his responsibility." Kayla was beginning to understand. These two little girls sitting across from her weren't just adorable conspirators. They were protectors. They were watching out for their father the same way he'd been watching out for them. "You two must be very proud of him," Kayla said softly. Both girls nodded in perfect unison. "He's the best daddy," they said together, their voices overlapping. Then Hazel's expression shifted, becoming somber. "But sometimes he's sad," she admitted, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "He looks at Mommy's picture when he thinks we're asleep. We see him standing in the hallway just staring at it." Kayla's throat tightened. "That's why we were happy when Aunt Diane said she found someone nice for him to meet," Daisy explained. "We want him to smile more, like he used to." Aunt Diane. The pieces clicked into place. Diane was Matthew's sister-in-law. That's why she'd been so insistent about this date. "We saw him this morning," Hazel said, and now there was a hint of brightness returning to her voice. "Daddy was humming while he made breakfast. Daddy only hums when he's really happy." Daisy added, "He made a special pancake shaped like butterflies, just because it was a good day," he said. Kayla's phone buzzed against the table. She glanced down at the screen. "Diane, have you heard from Matthew? He's not answering his phone." Kayla looked back up at the twins. "Girls, your dad really doesn't know you're here? For real?"
"His phone is probably in his truck," Daisy said. "He always forgets it when he's looking at blueprints." "He's probably almost done, though," Hazel said hopefully. "He told someone on the phone he just needed 2 hours to check everything." Kayla checked the time, 7:25 p.m. If Matthew had gotten to the construction site around 5:30, he might indeed be finishing up soon. An idea formed in Kayla's mind, wild and impulsive and maybe a little crazy. But as she looked at these two brave little girls who'd orchestrated this entire intervention, who loved their father so fiercely they couldn't bear to see him lose this chance at happiness, she couldn't help but smile. "I have an idea," Kayla said, leaning forward. "What if we brought dinner to your daddy? If he's been working hard, he's probably hungry." The transformation was instantaneous. Daisy and Hazel's faces lit up like they'd just been told Christmas was coming early. "Really?" they gasped in perfect unison. "Really," Kayla confirmed. "What's his favorite food?" "Chinese food," Daisy exclaimed, bouncing in her seat. "From the Golden Palace on 3rd Street. He loves their orange chicken. But he always orders us sweet and sour pork too, and fried rice. Lots of fried rice. And spring rolls. The crispy ones." Kayla pulled out her phone and quickly searched for the restaurant. "Then let's order all of that, and maybe some extra for the other people working with him." As Kayla placed the order, the girls continued talking, their words tumbling over each other in their excitement. They told her about how their father had learned to sew just to fix their favorite stuffed animals, how he never missed a school play or a parent-teacher conference, even if it meant leaving early, how he built them a treehouse last summer, a project that took him 3 months of weekends. "The treehouse has a secret password," Hazel whispered, leaning close. "It's Mommy's Angels, because that's what she called us." "Daddy says we have her eyes," Daisy said softly, "and her smile." "She was a music teacher," Hazel explained. "She taught little kids to love singing. That's why Daddy sings to us every night. He's trying to keep her music alive."
Kayla had to blink back tears. She'd come to this coffee shop expecting a simple blind date, maybe an awkward hour of small talk, maybe a polite goodbye. Instead, she was sitting with two extraordinary little girls who were teaching her about love, about resilience, about showing up even when life breaks your heart. 20 minutes later, they were in Mrs. Ferguson's sedan, bags of fragrant Chinese food piled on their laps, heading toward the construction site. The elderly babysitter had been filled in on the plan and seemed torn between admiration for the girls' romantic scheming and concern about Matthew's reaction. The construction site loomed ahead, a skeletal structure that would become the new public library, lit by temporary floodlights that cast long, dramatic shadows across the lot. It looked like the setting of a movie, all angles and light and possibility. They found Matthew in a temporary office trailer, rolling up blueprints while talking to two other workers. Even from outside, Kayla could see the exhaustion in his posture, the tension in his shoulders. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, his hair was disheveled, and there were what looked like smudges of dirt on his blue button-down shirt. He was clearly wrapping up, putting papers into folders with the focused efficiency of someone who just solved a critical problem. Daisy knocked on the trailer door, 3 quick, confident raps. Matthew looked up. His eyes landed on his daughters first, and his expression cycled through confusion, shock, and dawning horror in the space of about 2 seconds. Then his gaze shifted to Kayla standing behind them, and he froze completely. "Daisy, Hazel, what are you... How did you..." He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes still locked on Kayla. "You're Kayla," he said, and it wasn't a question. "You're here, with my daughters." "Surprise!" Daisy announced, throwing her arms up triumphantly. "We brought dinner!" "We didn't want Miss Kayla to think you forgot about her," Hazel added, her voice earnest and sweet. Matthew's co-workers, 2 men in their 40s wearing hard hats and knowing grins, quickly grabbed some of the takeout bags. "We'll just, take these and go eat outside," one of them said, winking at Matthew. "Good luck, boss!" They disappeared, leaving Matthew alone with Kayla and the twins in the small trailer.
For a moment, no one spoke. Matthew just stared, his mouth slightly open, clearly trying to process how his 2 6-year-old daughters had somehow tracked down his blind date and brought her to a construction site. "Mrs. Ferguson brought us," Daisy offered helpfully, sensing her father's next question. "We asked very nicely." "We heard you on the phone last night," Hazel confessed, her voice small, "about the emergency. And we saw how excited you were about tonight," Daisy continued. "You drew a smiley face on the calendar." Matthew's face flushed red. "You saw that?" "We see everything," Daisy said seriously. Matthew ran a hand through his already messy hair, and Kayla watched the gesture, noting how his fingers trembled slightly, how his eyes kept darting between her and his daughters, like he couldn't quite believe any of this was real. "I am so sorry," he said, finally looking directly at Kayla. His voice was rough, genuine. "This isn't, I was just finishing up. I thought I could make it work, get there just a little late, maybe text you. I had no idea they would..." "Rescue your date?" Kayla offered, a smile playing at her lips. "We didn't rescue it," Daisy protested indignantly. "We caught it." "The date was getting away," Hazel explained with utmost seriousness. Despite his obvious embarrassment, Matthew laughed. A real, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. The exhaustion melted away, replaced by something warmer, lighter. Kayla saw it. The man his daughters described. The one who made butterfly pancakes and learned to braid hair and sang lullabies even when his voice cracked. "My little rescuers," he said softly, pulling both girls into a hug. They wrapped their arms around his waist, and for a moment, the 3 of them were their own complete unit. When Matthew straightened up, he looked at Kayla again, and this time there was vulnerability in his eyes. "I understand if you want to forget this ever happened. Having your blind date crashed by 2 6-year-olds and turned into a construction site dinner with sawdust and emergency foundation repairs wasn't exactly the plan." Kayla looked at Daisy and Hazel, who were watching her with identical anxious expressions, their small hands clasped together tightly. She thought about the past hour, about hot chocolate and whipped cream mustaches, about stories of YouTube braiding tutorials and 3-cheese grilled cheese sandwiches, and a man who circled a date on his calendar with a smiley face because he was allowing himself to hope again. "Actually," Kayla said, meeting Matthew's eyes, "your daughters are extraordinary." "They get that from their mother," Matthew said automatically, then caught himself. His expression faltered.
I mean, I didn't mean to. It's okay, Kayla said gently. They told me about her. She must have been wonderful. Something shifted in Matthew's face. The defensiveness, the fear of judgment, it softened. She was, he said simply. She would have laughed so hard about this, the girls staging a romantic intervention. Daddy, Hazel tugged on his sleeve, the orange chicken's getting cold. And Miss Kayla probably hasn't eaten either, Daisy pointed out pragmatically. Matthew looked down at the bags of food, then back at Kayla. Would you like to have dinner here? I mean, it's not the coffee shop and there's sawdust everywhere, but I'd love to, Kayla interrupted, and she meant it. They cleared a space on the desk, pushing aside blueprints and clipboards. Matthew found some paper plates in a supply cabinet, apologizing for the lack of proper dinnerware. As they spread out the Chinese food, the girls chattered excitedly, telling their father about their adventure while he shot Kayla apologetic looks that gradually transformed into something else: gratitude, wonder, tentative hope. So you really practiced your introduction 4 times? Kayla teased as she spooned fried rice onto her plate. Matthew groaned, covering his face with one hand. You told her about that? The blue shirt was best, Hazel noted seriously, studying her father. That's the one you picked. Kayla glanced at the shirt, wrinkled now from hours of work, but still clearly chosen with care. It's a good choice, she said softly. Matthew met her eyes, and the look that passed between them made Kayla's breath catch. It was brief, barely a second, but it was there. Recognition, attraction, possibility. Daddy, Hazel said suddenly, breaking the moment, are you going to ask Miss Kayla on another date? A real one this time? Will you actually show up on time? Daisy added helpfully. Matthew nearly choked on his spring roll. Girls, I like pancakes, Kayla said casually, her eyes twinkling. I hear someone makes them in funny shapes. The twins gasped in perfect, delighted synchronization. Yes, Daddy, ask her to Saturday pancakes. Matthew looked at Kayla, and there was something raw and hopeful in his expression that made her heart skip. Would you like to come for Saturday morning pancakes? He asked. I promise I'll actually be there this time. No foundation emergencies, no disappearing acts. 8 o'clock? Kayla suggested. 8 o'clock, and I'll even wear the blue shirt. It's a date, Kayla said. Behind Matthew's back, Daisy and Hazel high-fived each other with barely contained glee. Mission accomplished, Daisy whispered to her sister. But not quite quietly enough. I heard that, little conspirator, Matthew said, reaching over to ruffle her hair affectionately. Saturday morning arrived with golden autumn sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows of Matthew Caldwell's house. Kayla stood on the front porch at exactly 7:58 a.m., suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't been at the construction site. Before she could knock, the door flew open. You came! You came! You came! Daisy and Hazel shrieked in unison, still in their matching pajamas. They grabbed Kayla's hands and pulled her inside with surprising strength for such small humans. We've been waiting since 7 o'clock, Hazel confessed breathlessly. Daddy said we couldn't wake you up by calling, but we wanted to. The house smelled like butter and vanilla and coffee, warm and lived in and welcoming. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. A basket of clean laundry sat on the couch, half folded. School backpacks hung on hooks by the door. And there, in the kitchen, was Matthew. He wore the blue shirt, freshly ironed this time, and jeans, and he had a smudge of flour on his left cheek. When he saw Kayla, he smiled, and it was nothing like the exhausted, stressed man from the construction site. This Matthew was lighter, brighter, more himself. You made it, he said, and there was relief in his voice. I made it, Kayla confirmed, and I'm very curious about these famous butterfly pancakes. They're the best, Hazel assured her solemnly. Sometimes Daddy messes up and makes blobs, but we eat those too. The morning unfolded like a dream, easy and natural and right. Matthew flipped pancakes while the girls showed Kayla their art projects from school. They ate at the kitchen table, sticky syrup covering small fingers and laughter filling the spaces between conversation. Kayla watched Matthew with his daughters, the way he wiped Hazel's face without her even asking,
how he cut Daisy's pancakes into smaller pieces even though she insisted she could do it herself. The softness in his eyes when he looked at them. After breakfast, Hazel appeared at Kayla's side with a hairbrush and a hopeful expression. "Daddy's braids are good, but could you try?" Kayla's heart melted. "I'd love to." She sat on the couch with Hazel between her knees, gently brushing out the little girl's curls. Across the room, Matthew stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes, but Kayla could feel him watching. When she glanced up, their eyes met, and something passed between them. Something tender and significant. He'd let her into his daughter's world. This moment, this simple act of braiding a little girl's hair, it meant something. "Your braids are pretty," Hazel said softly when she finished. "Not as good as Daddy's," Kayla said loyally. "Maybe just as good," Hazel admitted with a shy smile.
Daisy appeared then, bouncing on her toes. "Can we show Miss Kayla the treehouse?" Matthew glanced to Kayla, a question in his eyes. "If you want to see it. Fair warning, it's just a treehouse. The girls make it sound like a castle." "It is a castle," Daisy insisted indignantly. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and perfect. The treehouse sat in a large oak tree in the backyard, weathered wood with a rope ladder and a small window. Matthew had clearly built it with his own hands. It wasn't fancy or professional, but it was sturdy and loved. "You have to know the password," Hazel whispered to Kayla at the base of the tree. Kayla nut down to the girl's level. "What's the password?" The twins looked at each other, some silent conversation happening between them. Then Hazel leaned close and whispered, "Mommy's angels." "Mommy's angels," Kayla repeated softly, feeling the weight of being trusted with this sacred thing. The girls beamed and scrambled up the rope ladder. Kayla followed, with Matthew climbing up behind her. Inside, the treehouse was small but cozy. Cushions lined the floor, drawings covered the walls, mostly butterflies and rainbows. And in one corner, carefully placed, was a small framed photo of a beautiful woman with green eyes and curly brown hair. "That's Mommy," Daisy said simply. Kayla's throat tightened. She was beautiful. "Daddy built this the summer after she died. He worked on it every weekend. We helped sometimes, but mostly we just watched." Matthew's voice was quiet when he spoke. "I needed to build something. Something that would last. Something they could have that was permanent." Later, when the girls were playing in the yard, Matthew and Kayla sat on the back porch steps, coffee mugs warming their hands. "I haven't done this in a long time," Matthew said quietly. "Let someone in, I mean. It's terrifying." "I know," Kayla said. "I spent 2 years avoiding it, telling myself my work was enough." "What changed?" "Two very determined 6-year-olds walked into a coffee shop," Kayla said with a soft laugh. "They didn't give me much choice." Matthew smiled, but it faded into something more serious. "Kayla, I need to be honest with you. I come with complications. 2 of them, to be exact. They're my whole world, and anyone who's in my life has to understand that." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Kayla said simply. She turned to face him fully. "Matthew, your daughters didn't scare me off. They're the reason I'm here. They're incredible. And the way you love them," her voice caught, "the way you show up for them every single day, even when it's hard, that's the most attractive thing I've ever seen." Matthew's eyes glistened. "I haven't felt this way in a long time," he admitted, his voice rough. "I didn't think I could again. And it's scary because last time I loved someone this much..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I lost her." Kayla reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwined naturally, perfectly. "I'm scared too," she whispered. "But I think being scared means it matters, means it's real." "Yeah," Matthew said softly. "It does." From the yard, Daisy called out, "Daddy, Miss Kayla, come see the butterfly we found." Matthew squeezed Kayla's hand once before standing. "Come on," he said, pulling her up with him. "Apparently there's a butterfly that needs immediate attention." 3 months passed like pages turning in a story, each one filled with moments that built a life together. Kayla sat in the audience at Daisy and Hazel's school play, cheering louder than anyone else when they appeared on stage as singing flowers. Matthew's hand found hers in the dark auditorium, and he whispered, "Thank you for being here." She started bringing coffee to his construction sites, learning the difference between blueprints and elevation drawings, meeting his coworkers who teased him mercilessly about the cute vet from the blind date. They went to a pumpkin patch in October, all 4 of them. The girls insisted on picking pumpkins that matched, and somehow they convinced Kayla and Matthew to carry 2 enormous ones that were, "The same shape, Daddy, can't you see?" Halloween arrived. Kayla helped with costumes, butterfly wings made of wire hangers and tissue paper. The girls fluttered around the house, and Matthew looked at Kayla with such warmth that her breath caught. "Their mother would have loved this," he said quietly, while the girls were gathering their trick-or-treat bags. "She would have loved you." On a quiet Tuesday evening in November, after tucking the girls into bed, Matthew and Kayla sat on the couch watching a movie neither of them was really paying attention to. Daisy and Hazel had fallen asleep between them, their small bodies warm and heavy with sleep. Matthew reached over the sleeping girls, his hand finding Kayla's. Their fingers linked, and something settled in Kayla's chest, a feeling of rightness, of home, of belonging. Their first kiss happened on a snowy December evening. The girls were asleep upstairs, and Kayla was getting ready to leave. Matthew walked her to the door, and they stood there in the entryway, the porch light casting soft shadows. "I don't want you to go," he said quietly. "I don't want to go either," Kayla admitted. Matthew reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered on her cheek. "Can I?" She kissed him before he could finish the question. It was soft at first, tentative, testing. Then his hand slid to his waist, and hers wrapped around his neck, and it deepened into something sure and certain and inevitable. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Matthew pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. "I'm already there," Kayla whispered back. Upstairs, neither of them knew that 2 little girls were peeking through the banister, watching with wide smiles and clasped hands. "Daddy's happy again," Hazel whispered to her sister. "We did good," Daisy confirmed with satisfaction. 6 months after 2 little girls walked into a coffee shop on a mission, Matthew Coldwell stood at the door of that same coffee shop with a small velvet box in his pocket and his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. The girls were with Mrs. Ferguson, allegedly having dinner and movie night, but really waiting by their phones for the text that would tell them to come. Matthew had told them his plan 3 days ago. Daisy had cried. Hazel had hugged him so tight he couldn't breathe. Both had insisted on helping him pick the ring, dragging him to 3 different jewelry stores until they found the one that sparkled like Mommy's eyes. Now he sat at the corner table, the exact table where Kayla had sat alone 6 months ago, and waited. When Kayla walked through the door, she looked confused. "Matthew, I thought we were meeting at the restaurant on 5th. "Come sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat, her brow furrowed. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Matthew said. His hands were shaking. "I wanted to bring you here, to where it all started." Kayla's expression softened, understanding dawning. "6 months ago," Matthew continued, "I was supposed to meet you right here at 6:30. I was 17 minutes late. I thought I'd ruined everything before it even began." "Matthew." But 2 little girls had other plans. They walked through that door with determination in their eyes and whipped cream on their noses, and they changed my life. Kayla's eyes were already glistening. "They brought me back to life," Matthew said, his voice cracking. "But you, Kayla, you gave me permission to live again, to hope again, to believe that loving someone new didn't mean betraying the love I lost." He pulled out the velvet box, and Kayla's hand flew to her mouth. "You walked into our lives when we needed you most," Matthew said, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "You loved my daughters like they were yours. You brought light back into our house. You made butterfly pancakes taste better. He stopped, overwhelmed. "You're my second chance." and I don't want to waste another second of it. Kayla Emerson, will you marry me?" For a moment, Kayla couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded frantically. "Yes, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Matthew slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. It fit perfectly, just like everything else about them. And then the bell above the door chimed. "We knew it!" Daisy and Hazel burst through the entrance like tiny tornadoes, Mrs. Ferguson trailing behind them with a resigned but happy smile. The girls crashed into Kayla and Matthew, a tangle of arms and tears and laughter. "We knew you'd say yes," Daisy squealed. "We picked the ring," Hazel announced proudly. "Do you like it?" Kayla laughed through her tears, pulling both girls into her arms. "I love it. I love you both so much." "We love you too," they said in unison. Matthew wrapped his arms around all three of them, and in that moment, in the same coffee shop where this had all begun, they became what they were always meant to be: a family. 1 year later, on a perfect autumn Saturday, Kayla stood in a simple white dress in front of 30 people who loved them. The ceremony was small, intimate, held in the same backyard where the treehouse stood. Daisy and Hazel walked down the aisle first, wearing butterfly dresses that shimmered in the sunlight. They carried a single white rose between them, which they carefully placed on an empty chair in the front row. A chair for the mother who couldn't be there, but whose love had shaped the daughters, who would now call Kayla family. When it was time for vows, Kayla's voice was steady, despite the tears on her cheeks. "I came to a coffee shop looking for a date. I found 2 little matchmakers instead. They rescued me as much as you rescued me. They taught me that love doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes it's 17 minutes late, carried in by 2 brave girls who refused to let their daddy's happiness slip away." She turned to Daisy and Hazel, who stood beside her in their butterfly dresses. "Thank you for choosing me," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me love you." Matthew's vows were simple. "You gave me permission to love again," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You taught me that honoring the past doesn't mean sacrificing the future. I love you, Kayla, forever." When they kissed, Daisy and Hazel cheered louder than anyone. At the reception, as the sun set golden over the yard, Kayla found herself standing alone for a moment near the treehouse. She looked up at the structure Matthew had built from grief and determination, and she whispered to the wind, "Thank you for raising such beautiful souls, for teaching them to be brave, for loving them so well that they knew how to recognize love when they saw it. I'll take care of them, I promise." She felt Matthew's arms wrap around her from behind. "She would have loved you," he murmured into her hair. "I hope so," Kayla said. "I know so." They stood there together watching Daisy and Hazel play with the other children at the reception, their butterfly wings catching the last light of day. Sometimes love doesn't arrive on time. Sometimes it's 17 minutes late, carried by 2 little girls who refuse to let it slip away. Sometimes the best things in life come wrapped in chaos and whipped cream and construction site dinner. Sometimes you walk into a coffee shop looking for coffee and walk out with a family. That's the thing about second chances. They don't always arrive the way you expect. But when they do, when you're brave enough to say yes to the messy, unexpected, beautiful possibility of it all, that's when the real story begins.